Africa has always been enchanting. It is the continent of elephants, lions, safaris, wild animals, vibrant colors, ancient rituals, and landscapes that seem to be taken from a dream. And there is no shortage of destinations. But today, Bello Mundo will take you to Zambia. We will show you initiation ceremonies, ancient rituals, tourists diving on the edge of an abyss, and boys who disappear into the bush and return unrecognizable. It is a fascinating country. But despite everything, it has never been easy. While some people take photos and go on safaris, others live without bathrooms, roads, or even knowing what infrastructure is. And that's exactly where we're taking you today, because nothing, absolutely nothing, is simple there. Number 1. Location and general information. Zambia is surrounded on all sides. It has no access to the sea, no beaches, no ports. But that has never been a problem. On the contrary, its position right in the center of southern Africa has made it a meeting point of people, languages, paths. Everything passes through there. There are 8 neighbors around it. On one side, Tanzania and the Democratic Republic of Congo. On the other, Zimbabwe, Botswana, Angola, Malawi, Mozambique, and Namibia. A bunch of borders that help explain why so much mixes here. There are remnants of ancient kingdoms, marks of colonization, cross-border trade, and animals that don't recognize the country. The capital, Lusaka, is where life moves faster. But Zambia is not just a city. It has a national park the size of a state, a village that can only be reached by boat, a forest region with dirt roads, scattered plantations, and communities that maintain ancient rituals to this day. Most of the territory is formed by a high plateau, over 1,000 meters above sea level. The rivers are wide, the terrain is rugged, and nature runs wild. And in the middle of this scenery, a column of white mist rises continuously. The locals call it the smoke that thunders. Some say that a spirit lives there, but that part of the story we'll save for later. Because before talking about the smoke that rises, we need to go back in time and understand the country's history. Because Zambia's history began long before it had that name. Number 2. History. Long before it was called Zambia, this land was already occupied by people who knew how to live on the move. One of the largest groups to pass through there were the Bantu, people from the region that is now the border between Cameroon and Nigeria. They began to spread across Africa more than 1,000 years ago, arriving in successive waves and bringing with them languages, tools, agricultural techniques, and their own way of organizing themselves. When they arrived in what is now Zambia, they did not come as loose tribes. They formed complex communities with active trade, leadership systems, and knowledge of the soil, rivers, and roots. In the west of the country, for example, the Lozi people emerged, with a traditional monarchy ruled by a king called Litunga, whose lineage still exists today. In the north, the Bemba created a more decentralized system based on alliances between clans, agriculture, and military resistance. And that was only part of the map. There were dozens of groups living there, each with their own language, rituals, and rules, but all connected by trade, marriage, and agreements. It was a melting pot of cultures long before any Europeans set foot on that land. But in the 19th century, the British arrived. First came the missionaries, then the miners, and finally official colonization. The land became a colony and was renamed Northern Rhodesia, used mainly for copper mining. Independence only came in 1964, amid unstable neighbors and an economy controlled from abroad. This is how modern Zambia was born, a country that still bears the traces of everything that came before it. Number 3. Population, religion, and beliefs. Traveling through the different regions of Zambia, you will find a human mosaic that changes its face, language, and beliefs every few miles. There are more than 20 million people living side by side, divided into more than 70 ethnic groups. Each has its own accent, history, and particular way of relating to the world. Communication there happens in layers. English is the official language and appears in newspapers, schools, and government speeches. But among neighbors, local languages predominate. Bemba is widely spoken in the northern regions and in large cities such as Lusaka and Kitwe. Nyanja is more common in the south and in everyday life in the capital. In addition, there are dozens of other languages spread across the interior, often restricted to a single people or village. It is not uncommon for someone to grow up speaking 3 or 4 of them at the same time. In terms of religion, the majority declare themselves Christian. However, Christianity as practiced there has taken on its own characteristics. In many churches, the music is vibrant, services include dancing, and there is room for spiritual healing and prophecy. Pentecostal, evangelical, and Catholic groups coexist with local communities that still hold older beliefs linked to the land, their ancestors, and the power of nature. It is this coexistence of languages, faiths, and roots that shapes the country's daily life. A diverse daily life, but with an identity that is recognized even in its differences. Number 4. Customs, etiquette, and traditions. Between a conversation at the market and a family ceremony, what stands out in Zambia is a deep sense of respect for human relationships. Etiquette is not written on signs or in manuals, but appears in the simplest everyday gestures. Greeting someone goes beyond a handshake. In many ethnic groups, such as the Tonga and Lozi, it is common for the greeting to be accompanied by a slight bow of the head or even a bow with bent knees, especially when addressing older people or those in authority. Special care is taken with the way people speak, avoiding interruptions and preferring slow, direct, but always polite phrases. In rural areas, the use of chitenge remains strong. It is a vibrant, patterned cloth that can be worn in various ways. It serves as a skirt, scarf, apron, or ceremonial accessory. Many women wear it daily, not only out of tradition, but because each pattern can carry a meaning, whether mourning, celebration, fertility, or family identity. At community meetings or family dinners, those who serve the food usually wait for the elders to eat first. This practice is linked to wisdom, social order, and the idea that the youngest learn by watching. In addition, there is a code of silence that is not always a sign of shyness. Speaking little in public, especially among strangers or in front of leaders, is a sign of prudence. And even with the advancement of cities, many of these norms remain strong. These are habits that are not imposed by force, but are repeated by example. And that, over there, is worth a lot. Number 5. Rituals of life and death. Although visiting Zambia for a safari is the norm, there is another side to this country that is equally fascinating. We are talking about traditions. Behind the parks, rivers, and wildlife, Zambia holds a cultural wealth that has survived the test of time. And among dances, masks, and ceremonies that span generations, each people has found its own way to connect with what came before. One of the most striking rituals here is the Likumbi Liamise, performed by the Luvale people in the northwest of the country. For several days, boys undergo an initiation process that marks the transition from childhood to adulthood. They disappear from the villages and return covered in colorful masks, with dances, songs, and stories that mix teachings with theater. The masks are called makishi, each representing a different figure from the spiritual or social world. And the curious thing is that the dancers never reveal their identity, not even to their own relatives. There is also the Lozi ritual, known as Kuomboka, which takes place when the rivers overflow. The king of the tribe moves from the plains to higher ground, and this move is made in a gigantic royal boat, accompanied by hundreds of rowers. The event draws crowds with drums, traditional dress, and a floating parade that looks like something out of a movie. Among the Bemba, another traditional people of the country, there is a ritual of preparation for marriage called chisungu. Young girls spend weeks learning about adult life from older women. It is a time of teaching, singing, dancing, and advice, where everything is transmitted orally to the sound of ancestral songs and purification rituals. And there's more. In some regions, it is believed that certain trees are home to spirits, so no one cuts or touches them without permission from the local elder. Mourning ceremonies in various tribes can last for days, with candles, drums, and even the creation of wooden sculptures to honor the departed. The truth is that in Zambia, rituals are not just celebrations. They are living memory, the past incarnate, and a constant reminder that even with time passing outside, there are people who still know how to stop, breathe, and honor what came before. And if that's impressive, just wait until you see the places that preserve these traditions. Number 6. Places to visit and stories that still live on. As we showed at the beginning of the video, when we presented the geography of Zambia, the country is practically an open-air park. But there is one place that steals the show. It's the famous Victoria Falls, one of the largest and most impressive waterfalls in the world. And its nickname says it all, the smoke that thunders. The white mist rising from the falls is so intense that it can be seen from miles away. And according to the legend of the Tokalea people, that smoke is a sign of the presence of an ancient spirit that protects the river. Nearby, on a natural ledge of the waterfall itself, is one of the most extreme spots in Zambia, the Devil's Pool. I know the name can be scary. This place only appears during the dry season and gets its name because it is a pool that is literally on the edge of the abyss. You can get into the water and see the river plunging inches from your feet. Another place worth mentioning is the South Luangwa National Park, considered one of the best in Africa for walking safaris. No jeeps. It's just you, a guide, and the animals passing by in the middle of the forest. There is also the Kafue National Park, one of the largest on the continent, full of different landscapes and a huge variety of animals, from lions to exotic birds. It is a less touristy destination, ideal for those who want a wilder and more authentic experience. And if the plan is to visit a quieter but still surprising place, Lake Bangweulu is a good choice. The name means where the water meets the sky, and the landscape lives up to its name. It is said that a mystical creature, similar to a dragon snake, lives there and protects the waters of the region. For those looking for something more urban, there is the city of Livingstone, which serves as a base for exploring the falls, and of course the capital Lusaka, where you can visit local markets, see the hustle and bustle of the streets, and try the typical food. And since we're talking about food, that's our next topic. Number 7. Gastronomy. In Zambia, the main dish does not come from industrial stoves, but from oral traditions passed down from generation to generation. Almost every meal revolves around nshima, a dough made from white corn flour and water, stirred until it becomes very firm. It doesn't have much flavor on its own, but it is made precisely to accompany the so-called relishes, which are side dishes, meats, vegetables, sauces, or legumes, all well seasoned. One of the most popular fillings is mopane worms, protein-rich caterpillars that are crunchy on the outside and soft on the inside. They are harvested during the rainy season, dried in the sun, and then prepared with pepper, onion, or even tomato sauce. In many places, they are sold as snacks, right on the street. Among the most commonly used vegetables are pumpkin and cassava leaves, always sautéed with tomatoes and ground peanuts. Peanuts, incidentally, are used in almost everything: sauces, sweets, savory dishes, and even drinks. In the countryside, it is common to see large pots cooking chibwabwa, a kind of green cream made from cassava leaves. The most commonly eaten meats are chicken and river fish. One of the most famous is buka buka, caught in Lake Tanganyika and served whole, with skin, head, and all. It can be grilled or cooked with local herbs. In street markets, the smell of dried fish being smoked is constant. To drink, there is munkoyo, made from roots and fermented corn, served cold in a clay jug. It is sour, light, and refreshing, and at parties, chibuku comes into play, a craft beer made from corn, dense, full-bodied, and with a very strong flavor. Number 8. No bathroom. There are things that seem so basic that we don't even think about them. Going into the bathroom, closing the door, using the toilet, flushing. But for a long time, this was simply not part of the routine for most Zambians. That's right, it may seem unbelievable, but until a few years ago, most homes in Zambia did not have bathrooms. And although it may seem like an exaggeration, it is not. What you saw were entire families relieving themselves in the woods, in makeshift holes, trying to maintain some kind of privacy on the bare ground. Change only began to take shape in 2015, when public campaigns and international initiatives began to pressure the government for basic improvements. However, progress has been slow and uneven, and even today the problem is far from being solved. Zambia has almost 20 million inhabitants. More than half live in rural areas, scattered in remote villages where infrastructure is still a luxury. And that's where the problem is, literally. According to the latest government data, only 36% of Zambian families have access to adequate sanitation. In cities, that number is closer to 70%. But in the countryside, the situation is critical. Almost 3 out of 4 rural residents live without any bathroom. We are talking about more than 7 million people. And there's more. About 6% of the population still practices open defecation. Does that seem like a small number? But that represents more than 1,200,000 people without even a simple latrine. It is a cruel contrast. A country known for its lush landscapes, cultural richness, and pride in its roots still has to fight for the basics. And when we talk about basics, we mean basics. Things that many people are born taking for granted. But they still need to be achieved. And so we end our journey through a country of ancient beauty, rich culture, and contrasts that defy any simple idea. What did you think of these curiosities? Tell us in the comments. Thank you for joining us here, and see you on our next adventure through our Bello Mundo.